why don't we start a business? You know, let's do it. That they often had little cameras that they were taking pictures with. So, do you see where this is?
That's from the beach.
That's from the beach, and the cottage is here.
Yes.
Amazing.
Is this it right
Hardly
here,
a tree.
kind of almost in the center?
I think so.
I think that looks like the head.
What
the
that
shape
means
of it.
is that all this was way down. And there was
Exactly.
those trees were not here.
Exactly. Isn't that amazing? And the reason, I'll just jump ahead so you see why I think this is about 1914. Some of these photographs are from, see, and the
That's World War One.
World War One, exactly, and also from the clothes that Elizabeth is wearing. There's a photograph here of her with, here's her dog. They love dogs. They had a grouchy cat also. But some images seem of Salem and of her mother's garden. But like this bathing costume, for example, that seems, 19 before the end of the war.
And this even could be Hidden Lake or one of these local lakes.
It could
here.
be, yes. This is.
It's a wonderful place to swim.
Yes, and something else before I forget that I wanted to emphasize was that, Elizabeth was almost deaf.
Oh, really?
Yes, and her father was practically deaf.
Oh,
Her
interesting.
father, Judge Lord, who was such an amazing person and did so many things. He got concussed from a cannon in in the Civil War. He was from Delaware, and his family, his parents were Confederate sympathizers. But then the war started, or slavery sympathizers, I'm sorry to say. And then the war started, and he went and left college right away and gathered a group of young guys to make some kind of unit. And they fought on the Union side.
On the Union side?
Yes.
He had a change of heart.
Yes, he thought differently
than his parents.
And he actually knew Lincoln. And my Aunt Elizabeth wrote an article, I'll try to find it, where she wrote about how they met at a reception for Lincoln. Because her name was Juliette Montague, her mother, and she was practically an orphan. Her mother, I think, died in childbirth, giving life to her. And her father was an inventor and
I'm going to
very distracted. And anyway, but her aunt and uncle raised her, and they were very involved in the community and in the arts and music and so on in Baltimore. So they loved Juliette and took her to all these, concerts and museums and things like that. And they gave a reception for Lincoln, and there were very few receptions for Lincoln in Baltimore, because I didn't realize this. I grew up in Washington, D.C., but that was considered a southern
Baltimore,
city.
yes.
Baltimore.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Maryland was a
slave state.
Yeah, it was on the...
And so, and her aunt, Juliette was 18, and her aunt said, Juliette, I've met Mr. Lincoln before, but you haven't. Why? I think it would be nice if you act as hostess with your uncle and are in the receiving line so you can meet the president when he comes by, and at least shake his hand. And he came by, and then Lieutenant Lord, William Lord, was in his group. I don't think he was an aide. My dad used the word aide, but Lincoln had lots of aides. He needed all the help that he could get. But
what year was he born? About.
I should know that, and I don't. But I think it
William
might
Lord?
be like 18 in the 1840s.
40. So he was in his,
So he'd
he
be
was in his
able
20s.
in his 20s.
There's an article online about him. I don't remember it, but I looked
He has
it up.
a big mustache.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he
well,
looks
that-
very stern.
Yes.
But the thing was that in the war, a cannon went off near him and it concussed his ear. And I saw from Aunt Elizabeth sometimes people who have a hearing disability, they seem stern, but it's just they can't hear all the little things that are going on. So
They're
They're
not
not-
doing facial responses based on
Yes.
what is, yeah.
yeah. So, but and in this article by Aunt Elizabeth, she wrote that that Lincoln was so charmed with Juliet that he kept saying, "Now just stay here, young lady," and now this, that, the other, and that other young men were trying to ask her to go dance with them, and he'd say, "You just go," because it's rare to meet a young lady with, so intelligent and all this. Aunt Elizabeth wrote it all. But that's where she met great-grandfather Lord. And he asked to marry her, and her aunt and uncle said, "Well, you're a very nice young man, obviously, but you're a lieutenant, and how can you take care of our wonderful niece, like this?" And he had to prove himself. And I think it was like 8 years or something that they wrote back and forth. And he went out after the war, he went out to Alaska during the purchase or exchange. And I have an incredible book. It looks like this, but a bit bigger. No, like this, that Mother gave me, that's full of great-grandmother's Aunt Fanny going out there maybe to visit him or something like that. And it's all the fish, the special fish of that area. And they're so beautiful, like all the different kind of colors and all this. Anyway, finally they allowed them to marry, and he had gone from Alaska to here, and he held so many positions, like I can't even remember them all, but ultimately he became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and Mother and Dad said that was his most important, or his best position, where he really shone, and he did lots of good things, but then laid her governor. But by the time Elizabeth was born, her mother had, of course, moved out here and become just enamored of the Northwest and of Oregon. And she, because her husband couldn't hear well, she was the one that would go with him and kind of lean on the fence talking to the farmer and say, "Yes, look at the crop," and all this. And she loved it. She absolutely loved it, and was very enterprising. And across the street from where they lived was the bush farm or pasture, and Miss Sally Miss Sally Bush was such a remarkable person, and encouraged her to come. And she marveled at all the wildflowers there. Would say, "What is this, Miss Sally?" She said, "Well, this is that and the other." And that's where her mother began learning about plants. And then Elizabeth learned from her mother and helped create their garden in Salem. And eventually, when Elizabeth was a little girl, they bought this property. And I'm sorry to say, my understanding was, my dad told me this, that the judge was trying to encourage white settlement here because there were many Native Americans here. And so that was part of the thing. And this was one of a bunch of houses exactly like this. There's one at the bottom of the drive.
Yes.
And there
That
are
green one
others.
that's really dilapidated.
Very
And
dilapidated.
the one next are the specters. There's a little bit
Yes.
left.
Yes.
You can see.
There's a little left. And so to set an example, he bought this cottage here, and this would be maybe, at the latest of it 10, 25 years after the purchase or so. And it's still very, I don't know how you'd say. What word would you use? Like remote.
Yeah,
Remote.
it was very,
Yeah.
very
Yes,
remote. There was no
remote.
roads, there was,
And
Yeah.
here's the house again. And here is
There it is.
Elizabeth with her mother. There's Juliette.
Look at this. Look at this. No trees.
Isn't that amazing? And the
Yeah.
brush
Yeah. Let's
so
listen.
low.
Yes. Straight down.
And here you can see that they've already added this porch, but the stairs were on
all that
the
way, on the
On
west
that end,
side.
yeah.
on the west side.
Mhm.
Yes, on the west side.
And that's,
You're getting pictures.
who's on the stairs there in their little sailor?
I don't know. Not everybody is identified, but
Okay.
I can see. I mean, this I know is Juliette Montague Lord, and this is Elizabeth here. And before I forget, although this is all covered up and it doesn't look like much, the railing here, it's
Oh yes, that
Oh yeah, it
interesting
has the
pattern.
Yes.
pattern which matches the furniture, right? There's a
yes.
connection.
It's
between the
designed by Edith, and she was an incredible designer. When you go to see the Lord and Schryver collection in special collections, mother and dad, thank goodness they realized, oh, this is important, and they arranged for that to be given there. But you see Edith's designs for this, and she did most of the draftsmanship. She was an incredible draftswoman, and as a young woman was one of the maybe the lead draftsperson in Ellen Shipman's office, who was the top female landscape architect in New York City. So it's all connected. Anyway, and here you see the origin of this, the pump house, they called it. And when I was little, there was always the woodshed on the other side.
Right.
That was always the woodshed, and every summer, Dad or somebody would chop the fallen trees here and then stack them there, and they would dry out, and then that would be used in the fireplace. And this, when I was growing up, was like that whole right side was one room, and to me it was very scary. It was, and it just had like a pipe or something, like a shower head there, and you had to go in there and stand on the concrete and get showered in there, like practically in the woods, and like that. But one of the things I wanted to emphasize was that they never, like the Bill Browns, their friends, the Browns, who have a beautiful place, but it's more like a lodge. Beautiful, beautiful, from the same period. They had a different idea. That was never the idea of the people here. And they also lived in a place, I thought, oh, they must be very honest because they never had a grand house or anything. They always stayed in the same house that was originally a farmhouse in Salem, and the whole family would complain, we have to, it's so difficult. And the judge would say, it's fine, we don't, why do we need to move for it, what for?
Wow. We don't need all that elegance.
We don't need all of that. So that was also the idea here. And when the house was bought, I was reading that the judge said, it's so far, and it's so difficult to get through, because you have to kind of ford Beaver Creek and stuff like that. And sometimes the wagon would get stuck or things like that. But
Well, and
Juliette,
there was no bridge.
there was no bridge.
In
You had to go by
Newport.
ferry.
Yeah.
And Aunt Elizabeth told me that there was a strip of the road that you had to drive. She was a very proud driver, really good driver. She said, I'm a very good driver. You had to drive like on planks that were like this, like one.
Wow.
And you had to keep
yeah.
your wheels on this. And it was so difficult in a place where there was lots of mud, and it was very, and then this
They called those
old
corduroy roads.
corduroy roads. And
Yeah.
an old fella was sitting on his porch rocking, and he would wait, and then he'd come down with his mule and say, "Do you need to be pulled back up on the road? And what choice do I have?" And that would
It's
be
like a good
25
job.
cents, something like that. But so Juliette and the children loved it, and they would come down here without the judge for a long period of time. And Elizabeth, they were brought up very, very properly. But here they were allowed to run and go barefoot and just be wild. And in a letter from Juliette, she says, she's writing her Aunt Fanny back in Baltimore, and she says, "We are so happy here, and I can hear the laughter of the children outside." And that was very different from Salem, where it would be like being a pastor's children, where everybody watches and to see, "Oh, you made a mistake," "Wow, okay." So what something I wanted to say is that the beach and the specialness here, that is crucial to what the attraction was. This was very special, but that area, if you go down there when it's very low tide, you see that the tide pools go all the way out to that outer, and it is magic. And north of Tourist Rock and Elephant Rock there, it's like the beginning of time at dawn when it's low tide there. And she would bathe there. Elizabeth would go and bathe there. I don't know how she had the courage to do it. It's so cold. But there's a little pool that still appears, and she would bathe there.
I think I've been at that little pool. I think
I
you've
bet
been
you
at that
have.
little pool. It's just about.
It's very apparent.
It's not small though. I mean,
Is it at this end of when
no,
you
it's
do
on
the
the
overlook?
other side of the rock. It's when you go down that other. It's in the other.
The one I'm thinking of is maybe like here to the end of the house, not so big.
Right.
And seals gather there, and there's the rock with the little baby seals, and the mothers leave them there, and they're all there like, and then the water goes down, and the mothers can rest and so, and then they come back, and they know which one is theirs. But there's so many pictures of the beach by them. And these are of Aunt Elizabeth. I mean, that is just so amazing.
Out there in the water.
Oh, look, she's just got a dress on.
Well, it's a swimsuit. That was what they. That was the old school.
Oh, and here she is in the water.
Yeah, a wool.
Yeah.
That it's not. Well, I've never been out there when it was warm in that water.
I have been, and I used to go fishing with my brother, and he would carry me on his shoulders, and I would carry the pole, and we'd go around the bottom of Elephant Rock, so dangerous, and we'd sit on the end, and you have to be so careful to not get caught by the tide. People die down here, and I always go up and say, "Please," and don't stand there, like on the end.
Because you can get smacked.
Oh, I myself have been knocked down by a sneaker wave, and twice my son saved me. He just, got me out of like a hole.
Oh, wow.
My boots filled with water. I couldn't. This is the tidal pool, though. Maybe it'll help to recognize it. I can
This
point
one
it
here?
out. Yes, you see it in both those pictures.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
got a very distinctive.
I do think I know that.
And more of the beach. And you can see that she would bring friends. I mean, I feel that Elizabeth was able, I mean, it's one thing like helping her mother garden and the bush pasture, that's all great. But here it's so wild. I mean, like you were saying, it's like a jungle, like watch out, it'll just grow right back over the house, And she was able, especially for a deaf child, to really touch things. And I love this picture. Let's see where it is. Anyway, here are more of the beach.
Look at those.
So if he was deaf because of a concussion, do you know why Elizabeth
I
would
don't
be?
know why, and I wish I'd asked my father. Why didn't I ask her? But at that time, you just think they'll always be with you.
Oh, yes.
And now I wish I had asked, what games did you play? What stories did you hear? But this picture to me is very significant. That to me is seal rock for Aunt Elizabeth. Like, yes, here
I'm
is
in the
my core.
ferns.
Yes. I
Right, hidden
found a
right
letter
there.
from her because
This is Hidden Lake, I'm sure.
isn't
It sure
that
looks like it.
magical?
This looks just like Hidden Lake to us.
Oh, really?
Because
Just down south of here, and
the
it's a
house that we used to
beautiful
have.
freshwater lake.
Yeah, the house that we used to, because
And it's just
this is
they
exactly
could
what
walk
it does.
just down the beach
You're
and they would get to.
closing the circle of maybe this piece that I don't know.
Let me look at her for just a second.
Oh, yes, of course.
She looks like she's in a nest.
Yes, yes. And I found a letter because I did a lot of research for the Conservancy on their background and all of that. And I found a letter from her to a client. And the client had said something like, oh, I found, or something, some kind of exchange. And she was like a very involved client, like writing back and forth. And Aunt Elizabeth answered, because she always seemed so stern, unless she was among friends and so on. It was like she came to life, and that the plants were like people, like, oh, when these leaves are in the sun, it's like they're laughing, or something like this. Like, for her, I realized it was a language. Oh, like, I had a mathematician friend, a good friend, and I never did well in math. I tried so hard, but I just, but my mathematician friend said, I can't believe that. Numbers are so interesting. They each have a different character and a personality. I said, really? And the way he talked about it was like how Aunt Elizabeth was writing about the plants.
The plants.
Yeah. And I don't know how to place this, but here she is with friends or cousins. And this is a time when there was that whole outdoors movement, or already way past the beginning of that, and Wordsworth and Emerson, and go find,
And women were climbing mountains.
Yes.
And this is interesting. That looks like hay. I'm trying to place this.
These are wooden.
There's something there, and there's something here, like a picnic table behind there, maybe, or something. Picnic on the ground, dinner on the ground.
Lots of eating out, and their picnics, I tell you, every summer there would be the picnic. And it was always at their favorite table down here that I can point out. And it was planned for weeks. This is how they were. Everything was planned for weeks, and everything. Now the box with the something, and you eat it like this, and now we're gonna, like that. Like when you went to their house in Salem, I was always fascinated that they had a table down in the basement just for wrapping packages, with the string hanging like this and the paper like that and the tape attached, and also a wood stove down there to burn papers, but also to grill a steak on down there, like. So they were very, very careful people. This is Aunt Elizabeth, and I think this was a cousin, but I'm not sure.
And they're just right off to the west here, then.
Yes, because
in this picture, because that's.
And look at how open it is right over here.
We just did some clearing over there.
And I was gonna say, Mother and Dad never, and Elizabeth and Edith never had this like closed off like this. It just grew, and by the time I inherited the house, I just couldn't handle like the heavy work.
You mean these trees?
Everything to the west was open.
Well, way back.
Looks like it, because look how far back they are.
But,
they're 30, 40 feet back.
But there's also in between time, between all the way back here and now, because I remember when I was little that the origin of these trees was here, and there were two like this. And Aunt Elizabeth said, see, Carmencita, how the moon comes right up, like there, right there.
You can see the moon right there, right now.
Yes.
And yes, I remember that was in one of the things that they talked about, of how
that she planned that. And also her seat, part of what she designed was this desk that had two chairs on either side, and she would always sit on the right side at that window and look out, because you could see the two trees and the moon, and then but also the top of Tourist Rock.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a teenager, I would go out there and like read Camus or something like that, like tortured.
I wonder if
Uh,
this, see the way the ground is here? This looks like this might have been taken from the same spot at 180.
Well,
they said, "Oh, we saw you speaking with somebody, or you were speaking," and I said, "Where did you see? You're here. I'm there." But one of the things I was going to mention was that now you see a variety of vegetation here, but I remember, like, certainly up until the time of Aunt Elizabeth's death, there were all these native pines that were very tall and just like the needles more up at the top, and they had a very shallow root system, and in the winter they would blow over, and this was always a problem because now you have to chainsaw it and
How big
cut it.
how big were they? I mean, then and then how big were when they started going over?
Oh, when they began coming to, I don't know. I don't know unless we could somehow figure out,
Right.
which is looking to the back there.
Mhm.
But what I was gonna say was that Dad had the idea of bringing back, my mother was Spanish from a small town between France and Barcelona, where Dad had his first job after graduating from college here and so on. And he was very involved in the cork industry there. There are all these cork trees there, but also it's the beautiful Costa Brava, with the rosemary and lavender and pine, and then the sea, the blue sea. And the pine trees there are typically piñón trees, pine nut trees.
Right.
And I was amazed. My father was so upright, but he said to me, "Look what I brought from Spain in the toe of my sock inside my shoe." And it was like a baby food jar of these pine nuts. And I said, "Dad," he said, "Well," and he took them to a nursery that Aunt Elizabeth and Edith worked a lot with, and had them grow the trees, and they are up at the top of the drive. And he always said, "I won't live long enough to..."
here?
Yes. And I need to point them out to you because they look very messy. But what
Yes, we'd love to know which
Are they
ones.
edible pine nuts?
yes,
Oh,
these
pine
are
nuts
primo pine nuts
From
from the
Spain.
Costa Brava. Yes, like
Wow.
the best.
Wow.
The best. And he thought they would be harvested by his grandchildren. But what I wanted to say was that I spoke to someone who raised, like an old farmer who raised piñón trees there, and he said the proper thing is that they need to have lots of distance, like, I don't know, I forget how much he said, but distance between the trees, and you have to cut the branches up to a certain point. So instead here they look all wrong like this and messy. But if it was culled and opened up, anyway, that was Dad's idea.
We gotta do that. We gotta
want to do
Yes,
that.
Yeah.
because this, and
That's really special.
that's very special, very
Yes,
special.
we would love to.
So
do
the
that.
nursery, were there other places those trees were planted, like in Salem, in the
No,
nursery, or was it
they just
specifically
raised them.
those two?
He just
more than two.
asked them as a favor to
Yeah,
please raise
get them
this
started.
Those
little.
two, not to produce more of them.
No, they're all
yeah.
No,
here.
but there were
Oh
more than
my
two,
goodness.
right?
How many do you think? Would you guess?
Not two.
I've never counted them, but I think there are at least 6 or 7 up there. But you need to. He didn't have a chance, like to. He got Alzheimer's and needed a lot of care, and so he couldn't quite follow through on everything. And I forgot to mention when we were walking down that there's a redwood tree
Yes,
that
yes.
you saw it's
Oh,
a
yes.
redwood.
Uh-huh.
I think again he said, "Look at this seed," Dad,
It's very small, the redwood that's
yeah.
here. It's only this big. It's not very big.
I don't know why he
Unless that's
placed
a
it
baby
there.
one. There
Oh,
was another one? No?
No. This is the only,
Really weird.
the only one I'm aware of. And I think, I don't know. I think this is a laurel tree also. One of these is a laurel tree. Some knowledgeable
What was it
friends.
that Craig called that?
Well, there's a.
To the left is a wax myrtle,
That's a wax myrtle.
Wax
but he did
myrtle.
not identify this one straight
Oh.
ahead.
Couldn't figure out
I
that
thought it might be. Anyway, you see them here on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of these photographs are relevant to the cottage.
one. Is this
Oh,
the
excuse
cottage
me.
though?
Yeah.
Yes, this
Yeah,
is the
right.
cottage with.
With
Who's that?
I think
with the
from
wide
the
open
sun.
porch.
Yes.
On the
this
west
look-
side.
Yes, and it was always open.
South
That
side.
was something that my former husband
Mm-hmm.
did. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who this family member is. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, you can see
Lots
how
of beautiful
interested she
rocks.
is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then this, I think, is back in Salem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It seems chronological.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely a lot more formal.
And this is her mother. This
What
is
year do you think this
Juliette.
is now?
I think this is all around the same
All
time
of the whole
period,
thing.
within a close range. And I think this was her mother's garden. And that's where Elizabeth became interested in plants. She had wanted to marry, but and there was somebody that she cared about, but she was afraid that she would pass on her deafness. And Dad told me that it was only later that they realized this was not genetic. This was
Oh, an
like
injury
a
or something.
fever, injury, or something.
Scarlet. A lot of people had scarlet fever,
Scarlet
and it would
fever,
do that, and
maybe.
other things. You know, I mean, yeah.
So,
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
both
Wow.
Lord and Schryver, they wanted it, had hoped for a different life, but they did the best of it by becoming professionals. Yeah. Yeah, so lots of, you can see how important this is to them. This to me looks like maybe down Cape Perpetual.
Oh no, this is Cape. This is the Columbia River. That's Council Bluff there.
Oh my goodness, Elaine,
Yeah.
that's so exciting.
No,
you
yeah,
know what it is.
that's where they built the. Yeah, this is definitely the. That's what I
Oh,
think
that's
anyway. I
Well,
could be
this is
wrong,
where
but
then they built on that in
yes,
the 30s.
they
but
did.
This is
This is
pre
Council
that,
Bluff.
that big
Yeah.
thing.
Council. Is it what do they call it? And then this. What is this? Is. Oh, maybe this is from. Yeah, this is the Columbia. I'm quite sure
looks
that's
like
the Columbia.
So it looks like, they're
Yeah.
at the cottage and then they do
Yeah.
these day trips, and they
Yeah,
always
certainly.
did that.
Yeah, these are their.
Tourism.
It's like, okay, what do you do in the summer?
There's
Now,
her mother.
there was a lot of hops,
Yes.
and I wonder if that's something to do with. I mean, that looks like
I
a
don't
cultivated
know about
something,
hops, but her
or
mother was very, very involved.
flax.
Flax.
That's what it was, not hops.
Tried so
Yes.
hard. I saw some notes from Aunt Elizabeth that said that her mother almost broke her heart over this because she was so convinced that
Yeah.
flax could be a very important industry alternative.
That's right. She was working,
How do you say?
lobbying for it.
Yes, trying really, really hard.
I love this.
Oh,
That is
isn't that
so
Is
on
that a
the
fur
beach
coat?
in their fur coats?
That's amazing.
It's like Easter or something,
That's Elizabeth. That's
Oh.
Elizabeth, and
there
here's
she's got some
Elizabeth
children
also.
with her. She's so excited to have the little girls.
Yeah.
Very fashionable.
Yes. She was.
Look at this.
I don't know, like a very. She had tremendous presence, and so did Edith. Even though Edith, yes, look at this.
This is like they posed this. I mean, this is not just, oh, we're hanging around the campfire. I mean, you could tell the way they're all, okay, you put your foot up. I mean, that's beautiful. I mean, is this Elizabeth here? On the
No.
far? Or is that just somebody
No,
else we don't know?
I'm wondering if she took the photograph. Creations for articles from that time period of. And sorry, I'm just moving to see if I can see where it picks up about the cottage. But it's interesting to see this dimension where you see, it's part of the culture of the time to be out, fresh air baths and go, picnic and have. So we're gonna get back to the beach at some point, but I feel it's important that it's all in the same album, like of some
Yeah,
very
this is like,
happy
okay, what did we
time.
do this year? This is, I
Yeah.
guess,
And she
this
was
looks like
very
Eastern
close to her mother. Also, a lot of her values, that because the judge was so busy, you feel like everybody respected him so much and were so proud of him. But he was not as approachable a person. He was very, very busy with very heavy duties, and his wife Juliette was so outgoing and just interested in everything and studying, getting tracts about things and all of this. So I think no, this I feel is around here because there was an army reserve just south of here, not far.
Well, at Cape Perpetua, the army, that was World War II, though.
Her dog. She loved dogs.
That's a classic looking half,
There's
the half white, half
Like a
black.
pit bull.
There's a good photograph of Miss Sally, very elderly,
Sleeping in the
coming down to visit here, and there's a dog. I don't know. I think it was Aunt Elizabeth's dog, and here digging by Elephant Rock. I had the idea of writing a book about Elephant Rock for children, but as though the elephant is telling the story, because it really does look like an elephant with a trunk going in long, long ago, because the cliffs, or not the cliffs, but the back of the beach abutting the highway, it's full of shells. And Aunt Elizabeth had a very good friend here, Connie Fowler, who taught art at Willamette, who was a very fine artist and a precious Oregon artist, who used to take me like, look, here and see here, and we'd go sketching.
These were the shells were middens, right, from the Indians.
Yes.
What is a mitten?
Well, they would eat and throw.
Yes, that's
and
it.
they would
There
build
was
up
shellfish,
to
and this was a
monster
source here.
A festival or something like that.
Yeah, there was no end to the shellfish here.
Yeah. I know Mother used to go down with a bucket and gather mussels and so on because after she and Dad married in June of 1941, the U.S. joined the Allies in, I think it was December, and Dad enlisted right away. They were living over there in Spain, and he was still working at that Armstrong cork factory and so on. And he enlisted right away, but he was able to get Mother on the last ship of refugees going from Lisbon to get to New York, and then she got on the train. She couldn't speak English, or just a little bit.
Because she was mostly speaking
Catalan and Spanish.
Was it Catalan?
Yeah.
Is it
Yes.
Catalonian?
Catalan.
Yeah.
And she came out here to stay with Aunt Elizabeth, and on the way there were some, girls like these, like camping and things like that. And they said something like, "Oh, you cute thing, where are you going?" And she said, Aunt Elizabeth, Oregon. And they said, "And you're going to get off and look at some things?" It was going all across the country. She said, "No, Salem." And they said, "No, you have to get off and, look at things." And so she called Aunt Elizabeth and said something like, "Aunt Elizabeth, I go camping, with very nice girls." And, no, Carmen, what? No, goodbye, I'll call you later, and she went camping, and it was a great thing. They didn't have people like that in Spain, everything was very proper. Sorry
Well,
to
we're
take
gonna
so
showcase
long.
the dog and
Yes.
the cat.
Yeah.
Oh, looks like curry.
This looks like
Yeah.
her mother's garden, but I'm not sure. And then back in Salem.
Let me look at those wagons.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh. But I always felt that she was very proud, you know, of all the accomplishment and, and that was her idea too. And Edith's also public service, because in their work, they did a lot of, Lord and Schryver did a lot of work with the, like the tree committee, the tree commission in Salem. And I thought, what is a tree commission? But that's actually very important, deciding where shade will be and what kinds of trees. And it's the beautification of America movement also. And they were they just gave and gave and gave of themselves on that, and also to preserve bush pasture. And they said for all future generations, that anybody can come and enjoy the fresh air. But I was amazed that the Conservancy didn't buy this property. I was amazed because,
Well, it is amazing, really.
yes, but I think I know why, or because there's a difference between a scholar and, I don't know, the Conservancy. It is incredibly laudable what they've done. It has been so selfless and so remarkable and so wonderful that they have preserved, and they have an excellent reputation and just great probity and all of that. But still, there's not that scholarly background of, that what is the origin of the thought? What is the primary document? What is the, and
Primary document.
yeah, I got my PhD at University of Michigan, and that's what we were taught. Do not come to me with a paper where you're saying, and so says, and so says, that you have to say, the 1718 document reads thusly. Therefore, to do that. And so I thought this was so important because it's the origin of the thought. Here you see Elizabeth's heart,
Right.
and her mind, and who she was as a person, and the fact that she and her dad were deaf or almost deaf. It's just remarkable. And Edith was so remarkable. She came from New York. Her father worked on at the railroad. She was a completely self-made person, very bright, and a very good student. And I think she just wanted something different, from what life she would have there. And she worked very hard at school, like high school, like being on the newspaper in the not the newspaper, the yearbook, and this and that and the other. And she got an internship and got invited to go take a whole bunch of introductory classes at what is now the Parsons School of Design. Like early on, like she'd take the train from Kingston and go all the way there by herself, like age 15 or so, take those classes and all take the train back, and then got a scholarship to go to Lowthorpe prior to Aunt Elizabeth, and then became an important draftswoman in Ellen Shipman's firm in New York City. And then at that point, Aunt Elizabeth's mother died. The father had already died. Her mother died, and she had been taking care of her mother this whole time, and they traveled all over to China and the Philippines and everywhere. And her mother died, and she went on a few more trips and then would keep coming back to Salem. And my grandfather, her brother, they were very close. There were two brothers, but she was very close to Montague Senior Lord. And he said, Elizabeth, you're going on these trips, that's fine, but, what are you going to do? She was already 40, you know, and he said, you've always been interested in gardens. Why don't you do something about that? Why don't you learn it properly? And I will help you. And that's why she went to Lowthorpe and took those. I mean, she probably was one of the oldest students there.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, because Edith was younger. She was, by then, maybe, I don't know, maybe early 30s, something like that. And then they both separately decided to go on this special school trip that would be 3 months, going to looking at gardens in England and Spain and Italy. And they said, oh, I would like to do that. And then on the ship, they made a mistake with, and Edith, there's an incredible notebook of all the things she collected preparing of, when you're in London, do this, you know, just, it's so beautiful. There you see like all the things, you know, poetry and plays and Shakespeare and plants and plant lore and all these music, concert, you know, all this stuff. And then they're both on that same ship, and they made a mistake with Edith. We called her Tia Nina, Auntie Nina. Because she was so small, they put her at the children's table. And she said, I am not a child. Please put me at an appropriate table. And I don't know if it's then that she and Aunt Elizabeth met, but they become such fast friends, and they realize this is somebody who thinks the same way, same work ethic. We have the same idea of what the purpose of the garden is, and fundamentally what they thought was that good design improves life. Good design changes lives and makes life better. And when they did that whole, I tried to tell the Conservancy all of this, but they weren't. I'm not a horticulturalist, and you are much more, and that's extremely important. That's the other half of it.
Carmen, the real issue, though, is that the reason that they didn't do it was our fault.
It's not a fault. It's a blessing. It's a blessing.
This looks like dark roses, huh?
Maybe Salem again. I'm sorry I've taken too long to talk.
No, you haven't.
I think this is her mother's garden, probably. Or maybe even Bush's pasture. It seems sort of a repeat.
This is that same horse.
You think so?
And
Yes,
this
I know,
looks like
because
the
I was
same
looking real
farmer.
careful at that horse and the wagon wheels.
This seems the same farmer.
Yep.
They had an onion farm. Now we're back at the cottage.
Oh, look at that
Look
one.
at how clear.
Oh,
my
now
gosh.
this is a really good picture.
Oh, and I forgot to tell you that the fireplace, there was no fireplace here. When the First Lady of Oregon and the children, there was William, who became a lawyer, and Aunt Elizabeth, and then the eldest, my dad's father, teenagers, and then little Elizabeth and William, and they would come here, and Juliette would be cooking over a fire outside, and sometimes it would be raining. And Elizabeth kept saying to her brothers, you all should build a fireplace for Mother, because then she can cook inside. And she kept, you really should, you really, really, really should. And they said, and they said, Elizabeth, if you think it's that important, you do it. And she sent away, she said, I will. Dad told me the story, and she sent away to the Department of Agriculture, can you send me instructions how to build a fireplace?
Really?
And they sent a pamphlet. And much, much later, Dad sent away, said, is there a pamphlet, And he got the same pamphlet. And she followed it exactly. And she chose all those stones down at this beach. And there was a Native American friend who had she said it wasn't a wagon. It was a thing like with poles that dragged
Oh boy.
or
Like a
something.
A
Travis
sled,
or a
like
sled.
a drag
Something.
sled.
I don't know.
But it's up on a horse or a mule, and then it comes
Yes,
and then it drags to
No
the
wheels?
ground.
I think.
No wheels,
I don't
just
know.
poles
I
dragging
don't
on the
know.
ground.
That was
That was the
the early
impression I
version
got.
was, yeah, they would use poles made of a tree
Yeah.
and some kind of net and just drag things.
Well, that
Over
was
very
the
rough
very
ground.
early Native Americans. That's what they
Yeah.
did. That's how they moved children and other things.
Yeah.
So
Sick
do
people.
you know the name of that Native American
No,
or what tribe he was from?
no.
She was
I'm
an
sorry.
Alsea, and that would have been
That would have been. I think she was a teenager still when
Okay.
she did this. So that would have been. They bought the house, let's say at the latest, 1890, and she was already a little girl. I think she might have been 5 or because.
Certainly by 1910, probably.
Oh yes, I think so.
Maybe.
I
so
think
that'd
so.
be interesting because the Native Americans were really shuffled around a lot. They like the Eugene group went up to Siletz, and some of them from Yahats and the Alsea, and some of the Oregon history has
It's
a
a
lot about
crime
where
of-
they were. So I was just
Yeah.
Well, there was
very
the
curious who
Sayuslas.
was. Yeah, the Sayuslas wouldn't have been. It would have probably been Alsea, depending on the Umpqua.
And it should be part of the history.
Yes.
I just know that when Dad told me this, that he said that he lived near the beach.
And he was a friend.
That's the word that Dad used.
Good,
That's the
good.
word he used.
But you were, yeah, okay.
And then and she chose every stone and where it would go exactly. So how you see it is exact, and it has burned perfectly all these years. And before I forget, the iron is.
Just so I was able to pull it.
Yes, that's it, sir. That's it. That is the original back.
Oh, that goes behind?
Yes. I tried to bring it in.
We'll bring it in.
It's
Oh, it's very heavy.
heavy,
Yes, it's
Josiah,
thick.
really heavy.
We'll bring
Yeah.
it
But
in.
that was at the back, and I figured that was for the radiant.
Yes, it radiates.
Yes.
Yeah, because otherwise it all just shoots straight up. But
Right.
the heavier that is, the more it radiates.
Yeah.
I mean, it burns so beautifully. And there's the original screen also.
Yes,
that's
we see that now.
Yes, that's
And
the
we,
original screen.
we built
And
a
I'll bring
stone.
back the fire irons, sir. I'll bring
Oh,
those back,
thank
sir.
you. We built. Elaine and I built a stone
Yes, please.
fireplace, so I understand. When I was looking at these
I was
rocks,
so
I could see.
flabbergasted.
I could see how these rocks were placed. I was looking at how I've looked at them how they were. Okay, this was a good cornerstone right here, and this was yeah.
And then there wasn't any finishing, like there's no mortar or any of that. I mean, it was just like,
Yeah.
which a teenage girl, that's how, whose brothers she had been
Yes.
prodding. I can understand that. Can you do this?
And also, Dad said that she was allowed to come and stay by herself here to do this, which would have been kind of amazing. I mean, I thought her parents were amazing, really amazing. And they didn't accrue wealth. They had books, they traveled, they did things, they talked to people. They're very involved and learning all the time. The last thing Judge Lord did was to write the Oregon Penal Code. It's called Lord's Law. That was he said, if only I can finish this, if I can just finish this. And his youngest son William was helping him. He had become a lawyer, and he finished it and then passed away. So, yeah.
Wow.
But-
Well, you know what you were saying. A lot of it depends on how together the child is, how much freedom you give them.
Yes.
The teenager, the more, yeah.
To think, to explore, to
That's right. Okay, we know those rocks.
yeah.
This looks like it's got, maybe that's just a wave. I was going to say it looks like an arch there.
No, I think it is.
I think it would be very interesting.
And Elizabeth told me there's it was funny, one day she said, Carmencita, come here, I will show you a photograph. and she pulled out a photograph that was like under all these things in a drawer, and it was this lovely person, and it said, "With much love, Payne Lord." And apparently this was a cousin who left
I get a photo.
to go become an actress. I mean, a theater actress. Like she was in uh, an Ibsen play, for example, things like that. But the family couldn't talk about her because she had become a, yeah. And at the Bush
Become
House,
what?
Is
an
that dishonorable?
actress,
Oh,
an
oh,
actress,
yeah,
yes.
no,
It's
that
a
was a
dishonorable
loose
thing.
woman.
Yes.
That would be a very, that would be like,
And in fact, at the Bush House, Aunt Elizabeth told me that one day she went with her car or something, like to pick up somebody there. Yes. So the end of the album is, it's still the war period here. And this kind of very, she said that a woman came and sat next to her while she was outside waiting, and that she felt something like this person isn't normal, or something. Just, but it was a perfectly peaceful person just sitting there, and then an attendant came out of the bush house and said, "Oh, there you are. Come along," like this. And it had been one of the Bush sisters that had wanted to go to Paris to study painting. And the father put her in the attic and said, "You can't come out until you change." And she wouldn't change, and she lost her mind. Yes, so that was something that Aunt Elizabeth was lucky.
Yeah.
This
Have
is
the
the
freedom.
military compound, I'll bet.
Yes. And I think that I thought I saw a photograph like from, I don't know, it seemed to me like from the beach or from the air or something, where I thought there was an encampment, lots of tents or something,
What's the rocks
just
in the
far
background
south
here?
here.
there's no, I think that's a hill, I think that's looking east.
Yeah, it is.
I'm sorry
Oh,
that this took so long, but
No,
now
no.
you
It's
have
amazing.
the
No, no.
basics
This
of the
is
story.
a primary experience
Yes.
for us.
Because I felt that
That's
the
that
most
same,
important thing
same
is,
man too.
see, I wondered if there was somebody that she cared about, or a relative perhaps.
Well, no, it looks like somebody she cared about.
So I wonder if this
It
is
looks
the,
like that,
It does,
doesn't
yes,
it?
it
That's
does.
what I thought too.
Yes.
this looks like maybe the wagon road or something.
Yeah, just
Because here's the track. See that one track there, and there's another one there.
When you say Bush family, are they connected to the famous presidential Bush family? That's
no,
a different.
not that I know of. It's I'm sorry, small town things.
Yeah.
But in Salem, the Bush family, they had I think they had a bank, and they were a very wealthy family, and they essentially had a farmhouse there that had cows and all of this, and there were numerous children, and they did good works and so on. And Miss Sally was very important for a very important friend to Elizabeth's mother, and also she just seems to have been a wonderful person. I read a thing, she became like a hostess for her father, like running the house and all this, and they said no one who came to the back door was ever turned away without a big meal and come in and some clothes, that belonged to Mr.
That's how
Bush.
people who didn't have anything, they would go and they would,
Yes.
and there'd be little signs so that people would know, okay, this is a place where you could get a meal. Don't go here
Exactly.
because you'll
You'll get hot water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, like a stone put this way or something. Anyway,
Wow.
my thought that I wanted to communicate was about the house, and we should go through, and I can say, because you said that what's most important is the values of the people and why they made this, what gave them the strength to do these things. And early on, they just, each one, it's funny, each one, William Payne Lord, Juliette Montague, Grandfather Lord, Elizabeth Lord. And I would say, if I name my parents, especially my father, but my mother helping him, they all just decided, like, I'm going to do something, in unpromising circumstances. And I feel that that's what this house is about. It's not, I'm sorry, it's not a beautiful lodge or it has all these problems, because they never meant it to be a grand, here we are, this is us. But instead, turn with you and say, isn't this so wonderful? Listen to that. Let's look at the fire, and like that.
Right. We felt that when we were down south too. It's like gives access. This is so you have a shelter,
Yes.
so that you can have access.
So you have, and it's kind of low to the ground. I always thought it had kind of a Japanese quality almost, because grandfather spent most of his adult life in the Philippines, and Mrs. Lord and Elizabeth would go there like every 3 years and visit him. And there are photographs of them sitting on verandas, like a tropical veranda. And that's what I think was the idea of why the paneled walls and why this way and why this porch, that it's kind of this, I don't know what term to use, inspired by that.
Yes. Yes.
All right, let's walk
Shall we
around
walk
inside.
through the
Let's do that.
house? Okay.